G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 23rd of July 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The ProWritingAid, Power Games, Into the Earthbound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1 available now, all on Amazon. Thank you to all those who support the channel. You can support me on Patreon, buy my books, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, which you can scan right now, or wait till after the show. Right. Okay, so a Mirage has crashed, although, let's face it, there isn't much air combat going on. Most of it is chasing drones, and I think the sheer volume is wearing down the Ukrainian pilots. They're probably flying out of Romania. Alright, so biggest news, of course, is the third round of talks are expected to begin in Turkey within days, although some say the delegations have already met. That's just venue setting and, itineraries, private meetings, all this usual stuff. Nothing is really going to happen for a couple of days, but you'll hear announcements over the coming week before Zelensky hangs up his coat and says, "Putin's not serious. He won't meet with me. He won't do what I tell him." So, don't expect much out of this. If Zelensky does something, I'd be very surprised. He's a piece of shit. Always was a piece of shit, will be a piece of shit, and will die a piece of shit. Key events. Anti-corruption arrests have sparked a wave of protests in Ukraine. Don't know exactly what they're hoping to achieve, considering that every other protest against the Ukrainian government has resulted in young men like this ending up on the front line. Actually, the quickest way to join the army in Ukraine is protest against Zelensky. Right, so Ukrainian drone strikes on Russia, Ukraine. Russia, of course, has retaliated with drone strikes on Ukraine. There are drone strikes on each other daily, but as always, Ukraine always accuses them of hitting civilian targets. Now, there are two separate drone attacks on today. Most of them we'll get to later, but most of them, of course, go after gas and energy infrastructure. And this is a rare thing, but Ukraine actually admitted that. But they claim these objects have no military significance. Then why do you attack those in Russia? All right, so they have identified that the French-supplied Mirage 2000 crashed. They claim it was equipment failure. How would you know that without an accident investigation? Although they're saying the pilot says the aircraft failed. Yeah, is that before or after a missile went up your tailpipe? Who knows? All right. But again, there is very little air-to-air combat, and most of the time, it's been, they see each other and they fly away after shooting missiles, because they ain't going to stick around. All right? You stay in that radius, you're most likely hit, and there's most likely more than one aircraft. Kremlin doesn't have any hopes for the ceasefire negotiations. Zelensky does his jazz hand and the rollers of eyes, and how he's prepared for peace and all this, and it's all lies. He's done this many times. But he has now officially dissolved the autonomy of two anti-corruption agencies, which means they now work for him effectively, because the last thing you want is the corrupt president of corrupt Ukraine to be investigated for corruption at the time he's arresting all his opposition leaders for corruption, so that he can win the election and claim it wasn't corrupt. You can't hold an election and claim it wasn't corrupt if the people are allowed to think for themselves and decide if it's corrupt or not. No. You've got to do the Hillary Clinton method of clean-up. Actually, Hillary wishes she had probably done this. And the European Commission is saying this is a serious step back. Really? Wow. This is a step too far. Not all the other steps. Not all the wars. No, arresting the anti-corruption body Europe actually put this anti-corruption body in place, and they put 2 parallel agencies in place to make them compete against each other. So, it's not like Europe is obtuse. It just seems that way because lack of media reporting, but it's starting to leak through. And behind the scenes, I think Europe's been in a panic for some time now because they don't want to bail out Zelensky anymore. They just don't know what to do. They don't know how to extricate themselves from this war because too many Muppets have their hands up Macron's spine and basically pulling the cords. Macron is a Muppet of the French unions, same with two-tier Starmer and Merkel 2.0 in Germany. None of them have an original thought in their head. They all kowtow to Ursula von der Leyen, who works for the WEF. So it's a competition of ideologies and rigged elections and basically corrupt people who, and this is what most people understand, the corruption is like an invisible prison. They don't speak about it. They ignore the obvious. And they just keep selfishly demanding more all the time. That's corruption, right? When governments are buying votes and using foreigners to win elections, that's corruption. Alright, so an hour ago the Kremlin stated that, as I said, the first meetings have been confirmed by the Kremlin, and they just exchange notes. Nothing big. There was a body swap that, they use pretty much almost daily. Around 1,000 Ukrainians, only 19 Russians. Again, it shows you the huge disparity in the fighting, right? Over 1,000 Ukrainians dead. Again. And only over 10 on the Russian side. That's a huge disparity of death. Now, it's not I'm not saying Russians aren't getting wounded. It's just they're surviving. And most of them evacuated by their own. Why are Russians handing over 1,000 dead Ukrainians? Because Russia is overrunning Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainians are running out of ammo, and the Russians are just... I think this body clearing and this all these processes that are going on and clearing minefields is what's slowing down the war. Russia's obviously not fighting a very intense war, as you can see. Remember, this is one engagement every 100 kilometers. It's like you have 1,000 people fighting in one area, and you have this huge line of people just just sitting around. I'm not saying if you're a soldier, you wouldn't. This is the ideal situation. But it's more like World War I, where a few pot shots are exchanged. But there's nothing serious going on. And again, no movement reported on the front line. Chavashar, pretty much everything. Surprised nothing's been reported here, but lull in the fighting is common after Russia makes huge advances. They dig in and start clearing the mines and digging trenches, expecting a Ukrainian counterattack, which is usually in the form of drones. As you can see, in other areas, they also shift, but they are still fighting in here. This is pretty much there's no backing off. Once they get this close to a town, there's no backing off. Well, what they'll do is they might just keep this open for now. Maybe keep this under control while they finish this off. I think, given the intensity, they'll be wanting to protect their flanks, because the last big push, this is it. What are they going to do? Usually, before a war ends, there'll be a big push. An all-out assault on both sides. A 30-day massacre, basically, to burn out the war. Right? It's rarely talked about, but yeah. See, he talks about common enemy and all this. Law enforcement is not there to fight your war, Zelensky. But that's his problem. A common enemy. No. That's your childish mentality. In a war, law enforcement still has to be upheld. The problem with this war, it's brought out the worst in people. So, yes, of course, there's a lot of corruption. And Zelensky doesn't want that stain on his legacy. Yet, his legacy is going to be forever stained by his own corruption. See, a lot of people, this is what people don't understand about corruption. It goes beyond bribes. It's about people not doing their job. It's about people not caring when something goes wrong. It's about the lies and the cover-ups that go on. The inept. The people who just don't do their jobs. But the biggest corruption in Ukraine is the massive overcharging for food, the black marketeering, which is aided by Zelensky shutting down the borders. But he's defending democracy, comrades! Alright, so there was an overnight drone strike. The Russians have claimed to have shot down 33 unmanned aerial vehicles. The biggest story, of course, is the loss of the Mirage 2000. Apparently the pilot was able to eject. Yeah, occurred in the West. Here we go. Everything on this line is the West, okay? But there have been protests, major protests. Actually, there were in 6 cities. They're only reporting 2. Again, if there's no drones out here, yeah, he was probably moving to intercept the drone strikes. Pardon me. okay, he's probably into... Yeah, power was taken out here, but they don't say, but remember, it takes longer for drones, right? Drones are not moving that fast, so they're probably on patrol, ready for drone strikes on or around, trying to intercept them as they come through here. But as you can see, the Russians either redirected them or they were always planning to hit these here. But it's most likely there was air defense alerts in Kiev, and yet again, they probably turned out to be surveillance drones. But again, the bulk of the drones are along the front line. It's the most common... they usually drone swarm a vehicle. Yeah, just confirmation that the Ukrainian delegation is... meeting with the Russians. Zelensky's not there. He's too busy blaming Russia for everything. He sounds like Hillary Clinton, doesn't he? Alright, so Russia has advanced in Verachino in the Sumy region. Not marked on the map, but this buffer zone, I mean, it's got to be really pissing off Zelensky, and I think this is the only reason why they're doing it. But this is the third round of Istanbul-hosted Ukraine talks, according to Sputnik. And the Russian delegation has been announced. Well, and Zelensky added 2 people. There are 4 main members of the delegation and 4 experts advising them. You have a presidential aide, deputy minister, chief of Russian's chief of staff, main intelligence directorate, and deputy defense minister. And as you can see, they're all from Zelensky. The Ukrainians all come from Zelensky's office. Yeah, and Turkish diplomats and intelligence and senior military official will attend. And a lot of it will be very quick, very brief, trading of insults. Ukraine's going to use the word occupier more than they use the F-bomb. And they use it like an F-bomb. They'll bitch about all the infrastructure damage. And Russia will say, we're winning the war. You can't stop us. And go tell your American masters we'll meet with them next week. I mean, there seems to be a common pattern and theme going on in that there's no real diplomacy going on. I don't think the Russians are taking Trump seriously, and I think the Ukrainians are expecting Europe to perform miracles. I know a lot of people historically point to the fact that America entered the World War I and World War II late, and as with most American movies, you know, the cavalry arriving in the last 15 minutes of the movie and it's all over. Those cowboy movie days, big lies, you know. We saw history, right? We've seen Korea, Vietnam, the Panama incursion, disaster in Afghanistan, and disaster in Iraq. the proliferation of small arms has shifted the balance of power, and Russia is counting on the fact that it has China at its back. But at the same time, Ukraine is counting on the fact that China is holding a knife to China, ready to stab Russia in the back, and that prolonging the war will destabilise Russia enough that China or somebody will finish off Russia, and Zelensky will beat his chest like a little Napoleon that he is, and he'll want his, what do you say? He'd want his, crow moment in the sun, to crow. But see, everybody knows this, right? Zelensky's a nobody once this war is over. Ukraine will collapse. It'll go through successive small governments. It'll be completely destabilised and completely irrelevant. And I don't know if it's 40 days or 39 days or 14 days or even one day when Trump decides to pull the pin on this. But he has pretty much told J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance repeated to reporters, that he's ready. He didn't say he was abandoning Ukraine, but he's ready to do it. That if certain conditions aren't met and met soon, they put everything in jeopardy. And they've talked to the European allies, and apparently they agree too, that if there's no way they can stabilise Ukraine, if Zelensky continues to, dictate terms, which he has no right to do, Europe can't rescue itself, okay? The US has got to decide, Europe or Ukraine. Right now, there are those who still think they can do both. I don't think so. I'm not saying that what is right or wrong, but most people just do not get that the majority of Europeans, the majority of Americans are not listening to the people of Donbass, and they're not taking Russia seriously. Now, Trump has made it very clear, and he knows, and it probably has way more information than any of us have access to, and that's filtered down to a few talking points, that basically China's hoping for this war to continue. They're counting on the US to be bluffing. They're counting on the Europeans to continue their support. And I think one of the reasons why Europe is so desperate to continue this war is because Lindsey Graham said it out loud. They want to get their hands on those minerals. But you forget something. Oversupply of those minerals is what's keeping the whole world, overproduction. Okay? The world has overproduced. These minerals are in the ground because there's no market for them. Okay? Russia's not digging up gold or anything they need. Ukraine already sold its mineral rights to oil, gas and oil. Okay? Ukraine's been caught out stealing gas and oil. They've been caught out fudging the numbers on Burisma. That's why the Ukrainian government collapsed, because it was just all baloney. $20 billion was just written into the books every year. They couldn't back it, though, with anything. Their entire economy is false, fake, phony, a $3 coin, bro. So you've got to take it with a grain of salt that since 2014, Ukraine is anything other than a proxy war to weaken Russia because geopolitical companies, which should not legally exist. That's the problem. Companies with geopolitical power should not legally exist. But they do. And that's the problem. When a company has that much influence that they can dictate financial policy and everything else. And you see this, the World Economic Forum and the gathering of leaders. That should not happen. And until that is reconciled and dealt with and once and for all put down, we'll continue to have these problems. Because they aren't solving problems, they're creating them. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support the channel on Patreon. Buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, which you'll find in the description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.